Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's learning for good.
Do I need to go back to school? What about all those academies for instructional design? Are they any good? I get questions like this all the time from people who are transitioning to L&D. So what's my response? Your experience matters most. Review your current job tasks. What skills are transferable? Highlight those. There's a chance you're already doing more of this work than you realize. And then figure out your gaps and find a way to fill them. One way to do that is by volunteering. And that's what my guest, Dr. Ashley Duggar, is here to talk about today. Ashley engages volunteers in her organization to help increase the capacity of her team. But it also gives those volunteers a chance to deepen their skills in instructional design. So whether you're a small L&D team looking to expand the capacity of your team by using volunteers, or if you're someone who's looking to transfer into the field of L&D, this episode is for you. I can't wait to hear more from Ashley today. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Dr. Ashley Duggar began her career in higher education leadership and has since focused on strategic human resource management and operational excellence. Ashley holds an earned Doctor of Business Administration degree with a focus in management, an MBA in international business, and a Bachelor's of Science in Business with a focus in marketing, and the SHRM CP certification. She is also an Association for Talent Development certified instructional designer and holds the SHRM People Manager qualification credential. She currently serves in the role of Senior HR Business Partner, Learning and Organizational Development for Bucknell University. Her areas of expertise include strategic human resource management, learning and development, organizational culture, curriculum development, change management, leadership, and adult education. Ashley has presented for organizations such as SHRM, Coupa HR, Online Learning Consortium, Chief Learning Officer, ACBSP, CALE, and HR Professionals Magazine. Her work has been published or featured with HR Professionals Magazine, SHRM, Talent Management, Chief Learning Officer, Chief Talent Officer, and Higher Ed HR Magazine. She was featured on the cover of HR Professionals Magazine in July 2023. Ashley volunteers regularly with local animal rescues in the Central Virginia region where she lives with her husband, Danny, and their Australian Shepherd, Dexter. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You have so much just varied experience with your background in HR and learning and development and higher ed, just so many different ways that you're bringing expertise to this show. And I can't wait to really dive into this particular topic with you. Before we get there, I always like to know, how do people end up where they are? What is that intertwining of career experience that brought you here? So tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Yeah, and mine has definitely been winding. Even just hearing it back, sometimes I think of just that scene in Friends when they're yelling out pivot. And I feel like that's what I did throughout my career until I found where I wanted to focus, which was strongly in L&D and HR strategy. But I fell into higher ed. That I think a lot of people have a similar story when I talk to other higher ed professionals. When I was working on my undergraduate and then my MBA, I had actually moved back home to help out my family. And so I was working at the university and then also finishing my degrees. And I just, like a lot of people, I was in that path. I moved into a leadership role, stayed in that path as I moved to new cities and locations and eventually came back home. And I really enjoyed it because for me, I grew up and I was a first generation student. So I was the first one in my family to earn a 4-year degree. And it was always a path for me, or people would say, what do you want to do with this? And then I got my master's, and then I said, I'm going to get my doctorate. And they said, well, what do you want to do with it? And I remember one time saying, I don't really know. I just know I want more opportunity. And I knew how important education was for that. And so I fell in love with this piece of educating, especially underrepresented populations and underserved populations historically, and working with adult learners. And then someone said to me, it was my dissertation chair when I was doing my doctorate. She had been an HR consultant for many years. And she said, I think you would really love HR because you love this sort of problem solving piece. You love the training and development pieces, and you care about the people. And I thought, I was one of those people, admittedly, right? I said, no, that's not for me. I don't think that's the right path. And I started to learn more about it and talk to other HR professionals. And even then, I think I knew I was feeling led there because of the L&D focus. And I seemed to really enjoy that in the work I was doing as a leader. And so I finally broke into the field of HR officially. And then I took some time, just an opportunity arose for me to use my faculty experience, my adult learning experience, and my HR experience to be on the academic administration side. And so I worked on the academic side for a little over 5 years. And then a previous VP of HR reached back out to me and said, hey, I'm at this new university and we really need some additional hands to help with a new strategy framework, a strategic plan. And one of those big priorities was, how do we come up with our first institutional L&D framework and give some additional experiences to people? So I fell into it and then just stayed, but I always refer lovingly to my, what I call my gap year, where I ran an animal shelter. And a friend had also reached out, and this is why I think networking is so important. And they said, we are doing a capital campaign. We need someone to come in, and they need to love animals, but they also have to do some of the people ops pieces. I said, great, what could be better? Sign me up. It's how we got our Australian Shepherd, Dexter. I lasted 3 whole weeks before I brought home a dog. I think that's longer than anyone anticipated. So I'm going to give myself props for that. But wherever I went, briefly outside of higher ed, I always felt myself being called back to it. And so that's how I got into it and how I got where I am today.
What a fun story. And yes, 3 weeks at an animal shelter without bringing home an animal really feels like an accomplishment.
I think I should put it somewhere on LinkedIn because
right?
It really is something I was proud of. I thought it was going to be at 24 hours. So 3 weeks, but now, yes, Dexter lives with us and has been with us for over 10 years now.
So great. So now you're in higher ed, you've landed in higher ed, you're at Bucknell University. Tell us a little bit about this organization. I don't feel like a lot of people are familiar with the academic side of nonprofits. So talk to me a little bit about your organization before we jump in.
Yeah, I have been with Bucknell for almost a year now. I started there last March, so I'm almost one official Bucknell year old, and we've just been fast and furiously working on so many really exciting projects since I joined. We have almost 2,000, a little under 2,000 faculty and staff. It is a smaller institution in Pennsylvania. I also work primarily remotely for them from where I live in Virginia, and then get to go up to campus usually 1 week a month. So it's nice to build relationships and meet people. They also have a campus safety dog. He's a Bernese Mountain Dog. So I always get to see him, and that's a highlight of the trip for sure. But it's interesting because any institution I worked at, whether it was a larger nonprofit institution or these smaller nonprofit institutions, how we focus on bringing learning to a place of teaching and instruction it always adds a little bit of nuance to it when we're talking about higher ed. So it's a fun place to be. Sometimes there are challenges with it, but overall, it's such an exciting place to be because you have all of these people dedicated to and passionate about teaching and learning and have so many different swaths of experience that you can leverage.
That's great. And your team, you mentioned you're focused on staff and faculty, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So how big is your L&D team?
Currently, I am our only designated L&D person. I'm also still doing some HR strategic work and project work in that space. But thankfully, this is an opportunity where I can focus on L&D as that kind of one person team right now. And also, thankfully, I have a ton of support from our vice president and chief HR officer, our associate vice president. And then we've leveraged some other folks around campus and other teams that had a passion for, an experience for, or just an interest in facilitating and instruction and learning, who reached out and said, we would love to be a part of this, or we have this experience in our pocket. How can we help? So I definitely call on them, being a department of one. And I think that hopefully over time, we'll be able to expand our team. We're just getting into some initial inaugural frameworks being introduced to the campus around learning and development. So we're trying to phase that in a 3-year approach. And I think if we regroup in a couple years, hopefully our team will have grown.
I love that. And I wanted to explore this kind of volunteer role within your team from 2 different perspectives. So I want to talk about it from the volunteer perspective. What are they getting out of it? What does that look like for them? But also for you as the L&D lead, right? Team of one, what does that look like? So how are you currently engaging volunteers? How does that arrangement happen? Walk me through some of those step by step, like you reached out to whom? What were the parameters, if any?
Yeah. A lot of the volunteers that have either stepped up and asked to help, or just in kind of organic conversation as I see them around campus, or they talk to someone on our division of talent, culture, and HR in other meetings or instances and say, hey, I've got DISC certification, or I do crucial conversations, or I just really love building e-courses. They will reach out to me, or I will come across that in some way as usually part of another conversation and say, oh, we could really leverage that experience. Would you be interested in volunteering and flexing outside of your day-to-day work in this space? A lot of times, certainly, as you can imagine, if they have the capacity to do it, that's one of the bigger constraints. Everyone is so busy. But people have been really enthusiastic about volunteering. And I think a large part of that from my conversations with them is they want to give back to the institution in ways outside of their day-to-day role, which of course they're all very passionate about. But they also get to have this kind of creative muscle flex a little bit in ways that maybe they don't in their day-to-day role. And even for those that do, they get to do it in a different way. So for example, a lot of the faculty that I've talked to who have said, we are building e-courses for our students, or we're using this instructional methodology or tool for our students in the classroom. We would love to explore how we also leverage that for our employees' learning and development. And so we get to have some really nice conversation about taking those transferable skills and talents and things and either cross-training other people or directly contributing. So we are fortunate because we have such a diverse campus with a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different subject matter expertise, that people just are coming out of the woodwork now. It's snowballing in a really nice way of saying, oh, I heard so-and-so was helping with this L&D project. I specialize in instructional technology. How can I help? How can I support it? And so the volunteers have come about that way. But we've also had some student employees, especially in our HR team. We have a couple of student employees interested in working in HR, and they said we were really intentional with where we applied to be a student employee while we're here earning our degree, so we could get some of this experience that we can apply when we're looking for jobs or getting into our first role. How do we have some tangible skills on our resume? So they've even been helping out, and outside of their regular duties, they've been saying, how can I volunteer to look at how you build something like an e-course? Or why did you choose this vendor? What did you consider for things like a request for proposal? So it's nice because we get to introduce our students to those kinds of things that maybe they don't always get exposure to before they're in the workforce.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the nonprofit L&D Collective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious what benefits you've seen, the people who are volunteering. What are the benefits they're getting? What experiences are they getting that maybe they wouldn't get somewhere else? What does that look like for them?
Yeah, on the employee side, so for example, we're getting ready to launch this whole new framework in just under 2 weeks. So everyone keep me in your thoughts. But we reached out to some folks in other departments and divisions who either were doing some training for their team or for the campus in other ways and just said, we know you're a fantastic facilitator. If we covered as our department, if we covered the cost for you to get this certification or for you to go through this training, could you offer this to the whole campus? And so there was that dual benefit of we needed some additional people when I am a department of one. How do we leverage those talents? But yes, for sure, that what's in it for me piece, just like when we look at learning and engaging, the same was true there on the people that we talked to. And so we were able to say, we'll make the investment from a cost standpoint so that you can also increase your skill set, your toolkit. You can use those things, yes, for your direct teams learning that you're already focusing on, but then we also get to leverage your talents and put those in front of our entire campus for our staff and our faculty. And so there's that dual benefit of if one team maybe budget is tight this year or budget's already allocated or it just wasn't on the radar, if they have an interest in that area and we're able to make those kinds of matches and that duality of, hey, we will absolutely help cover this if you can help us bring this to our employees. That's been really exciting, I think, just to collaborate in that way and get some cross-functionality working in ways that maybe we haven't. And then the other piece is for the students, obviously, as they're building their skills and things that they can take directly to the job interview process and application process. That's exciting, but I think for me, it's more about seeing them find their own passion because they're hearing about things in learning and development, but seeing what it really looks like. They're not only gaining the tangible skills, they're starting to develop their own energy and excitement for it outside of just what is theoretically something they may choose as a career. So that has been really fun. And also just getting them to feel more comfortable and confident on the employee and the student employee side when they're volunteering with us, because as they facilitate to larger groups, for example, I had someone say, I've only done small group training. So doing a training with 100 or 200 people, I don't know what that looks like or how to navigate that. And so working together to build their confidence and their competence in new ways, that's also been really fun for me.
Yeah, that sounds really rewarding. And it does sound like there are a lot of benefits involved on both sides. I know managing volunteers can sometimes also be tough. That can be challenging. And it sounds like you have a lot of volunteers now that you're gaining some momentum here. So what does that look like for you as the L&D lead?
I think the biggest thing that I try to keep aware of is just this isn't their full-time job. This isn't their employment focus necessarily. And so even if they're doing something comparable in instructional technology or facilitating for their team, they're now volunteering their time and talents to us in a different way. And that keyword is volunteer. And so just having a lot of transparent conversation and dialogue around what is comfortable for them, skill-wise, support-wise, especially capacity-wise, is one of the biggest constraints, so that we make sure they don't feel pulled in some way that is negative from their primary functions and responsibilities, but we still are leveraging them in ways that are comfortable for them and work for the campus. And so we check in regularly and talk about expectations before anyone ever agrees to volunteer. We very clearly lay out, here's what we would really need at a minimum. For example, can you facilitate one session a month or one session every other month? Is that feasible? Is that comfortable? Sometimes even if it's feasible, you get into it, it's not the most comfortable. And so we have those conversations, not just before we ever agree to a schedule or parameters around a particular project, but we have those conversations continuously because things do change and they pivot quite a bit, especially in higher ed right now. So how do we navigate all of the external pieces, all of the pieces of our current jobs so that they still feel excited to be part of that and that it never feels punitive in any way? Like, well, you agreed to do this. Why aren't we doing more of this? So we try to be really cognizant of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to do a full-time job and something else. And even when they're getting value out of it as well, it can still be a challenge. And so I like your approach to just that transparent conversation throughout the process, lay out the commitments up front, but then that consistent check-in to make sure that they're okay, they have what they need, they feel supported, and they can still continue to follow through on that commitment. So if someone's looking to start volunteering, let's say someone is looking to transition to L&D, they might have some experience they can pull out of their resume, but really have found that there are still some gaps and they want to start to fill those gaps by volunteering. What do you recommend?
If you're a student, I would say reach out to your instructors or your HR team on your campus or at your campus community if you're online and see, are there employment opportunities as a student? Are there just special projects that maybe you could be a part of? And I think for employees, you already have this lifeline to your existing HR department or L&D teams, and also just making that interest known because I don't care where I worked, if it's 50 people, if it's 5 people, if it's 5,000 people, always need help. And a lot of times we don't ask for it until someone comes to us and says, I would love to help with this. We're like, that would be great. How do we make that happen? So if there's a contact that you could start to have those conversations with, it's a great first place. But even outside of places of employment, I was laughing because today I had a friend of mine from high school reach out and message me on Facebook and say, hey, they work for an animal emergency hospital. And they said, we want to do this conference with some of our veterinary technicians. Would you be open to doing a session on leadership skills? And I was like, absolutely. And they said, well, what's the fee? And I'm like, I'll just do this session. You know, it's good. It's just another chance for me to kind of give back to the community. And this is something I've recommended to peers and students for years. Reach out to local nonprofits, especially small business owners. A lot of times they're that one person doing everything. How could you help? Could you lead a training if they have access to things? I think about my church community and I'm going through classes sometimes. I'm like, oh, I could make this into an e-course. So what are ways you could leverage your skills with the resources these places have available, which are often very limited? So having volunteers reach out and offer to do special projects, it not only gives them that I'm learning new skills and getting experience I can now tangibly put on a resume or an application, but there's also that fulfillment piece of you are giving back in a way that maybe you haven't been able to before, and it's very valuable. So when I ran the animal shelter, we would have folks reach out and say, could we do a training on XYZ? And as you can imagine, we would love that, but we don't have the money to pay somebody, unfortunately, to come in. And people would always say, no, I want to just come do this because for me, it's a way to give back. And so I think there are tons of opportunities out there, whatever your experience level is or whatever resources you have access to. There's so many free resources and templates on even places like YouTube and Coursera. Academy to Innovate HR has a lot of really nice templates for things like doing a needs assessment or putting together some learning objectives. And so I think we can leverage these things in ways that maybe we haven't thought of before. So just taking that first step of identifying some places, maybe locally or even remotely, that you could get some hands-on experience or volunteer experience can be really impactful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate the different avenues that people can take to get that volunteer experience. whether it's in their current capacity as a student or as an employee, or kind of reaching out into their own personal community to figure out what are the ways that I can get involved, what are the experiences that I can gain, and really taking that first step to reach out and offer support. Now, on the other side of that, I probably have some small L&D teams or L&D teams of one listening right now thinking, I would love to have volunteers.
Right.
How do I do this? So how do you recommend they go find volunteers for their team?
Yeah, I think if you have any kind of broad communication channel, if you're working somewhere and you are an L&D department of 1 or 2 or even 5, sometimes you need more hands. And so I think just putting the message out there, if you've got like a message center or an all employee email or a town hall, just to say, these are some of the projects we would love to get volunteers with different experiences and talents to contribute to. I think you'll be surprised once you put an initial call out there, how many people respond. And then also just keeping that communication open. I've also encouraged people, if they're active on places like LinkedIn, to share there. Hey, we're looking to do an employee handbook for the first time, or we're looking to build some leadership development. We are looking for volunteers who may want to contribute and get some additional experience or just lend their talents in a new way. And people are excited to do that. And I think that when they see that there are ways for them to contribute and that they are welcomed to contribute, because sometimes people don't want to overstep those lines of, I had someone the other week say to me, well, I work in finance, but I've always really wanted for us to build an e-course on this kind of training for our campus. And I was like, great, let's do that. And when we got into it, they said, I've got some instructional design background and I miss being able to use it. And I was like, this is fantastic. I know you love what you're doing, but knowing you have this background and these other talents and you now get to leverage them in ways that give back, it was very much what's in it for me, what's in it for them. And it came together beautifully.
Love that. So we are going to first and foremost tell people that we're interested in volunteers and start there. I think sometimes I volunteered in my kids' parent-teacher group, and we often don't get a lot of volunteers for different events. And I'm like, but have we asked them? Have we told them we need volunteers? Have we one-on-one said, hey, can you volunteer your skills? And I think that's a missing component. We often assume people know that they could just get involved, and that's not necessarily the case. So I think just being really specific and like, hey, we do need volunteers. Here's what we're looking for. Here's the kind of help we need. That really sounds like a great place to start. So thank you for sharing that.
I would add too, if you are able to offer things like we talked about earlier, they could go through an additional certification experience, or you could get them some training on a new tool that they're interested in, but maybe haven't used before. It just goes back to, it gets them excited because they're adding something to their toolkit, but also it gives them that creative outlet in ways that they may be really looking for and can get them re-energized for even their primary jobs too. I agree. I think sometimes we think and we assume people know what we need until we actually put it out there and clarify it and ask for it. And then people are like, oh, I didn't know that. They seem like they're doing all these things, so they must not need any help, or they may not even know that's something they could volunteer to do. So sometimes all it takes is just being really clear about what the options are that people can engage with.
Absolutely. Ashley, any final words of advice?
I would say just not to overload yourself, because I know everyone is busy and juggling a lot of things, but whether you're looking for volunteers or looking to volunteer and give back or get some experiences, just be open to places, industries, experiences, types of volunteering that maybe you never saw yourself doing. Because I think back to when I started in higher ed, that wasn't what I ever planned for. I wasn't talking to my guidance counselor in high school and saying, I want to work in higher ed HR and learning and development. And so I am thankful that I really love it. But if I had never taken that jump and just gone into it and tried to learn all of these things as a part of that path, I probably would have said no if someone had just on paper said, do you want to do this? But I don't think so. So I would just say, be really open to it and don't be afraid to put yourself out there and volunteer for things, even if you aren't a subject matter expert in it. sometimes it's just working and collaborating with other people to learn new skills, even if it's baby steps on those skills. That's what I do a lot of the time. I want to learn X. How do I start? Here's a 5-minute video. Here's someone in my network who knows how to use it. Can we talk for 15 minutes? And so just don't be afraid to try new things. I know that sounds very simplistic, but we tend to bucket ourselves a lot more than I think we realize when it comes to how we learn and how we give back and how we ask for people to learn and give back.
Absolutely. Great advice. Ashley, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
What skills do you need on your team? Who has them? And how can you engage them? These are the questions I'd ask myself if I were a small L&D team looking to leverage volunteers to expand my team's capacity. And if I'm wanting to volunteer to get more L&D experience as I transition into the field, I'd ask myself, what skills do I still need? And who needs them? Who needs those skills from me? Then, and this is an important point that Ashley made, you have to ask. If you're leading the L&D team, ask for help. If you're looking to transition to L&D, ask how you can help. Ask for help. Ask if you can help. And that seems like not just an L&D lesson, but a life lesson as well. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.